Now that the outer limits have returned control of our TV sets, let's recapitulate some of what we have learned. We really know quite a bit more about Hollywood's hidden hand, where the idea of a fourth dimensional puppet show in our third dimensional reality put on by leapfrog oligarchs of the billionaire class doing international deception while playing as theater our various nation states developed, where it came from, who theorized all this, what its origins are, and what they believe we will consider its meaning. When I say the outer limits has returned control of our television sets, I don't mean to say that the billionaire class has given up its search for the miraculous, as they like to put it. Rather, they've offered the pretense of civil society continuing as normal through freedom of speech online. So, in order to reckon this perfectly ordinary freedom, one that's accepted to all of us, we need to look at the specifics that allow us to detail specific facts regarding how their intelligence operations work. For example, we know that Diamond DeGaulos and Cliff Richardson localized around the World Trade Centers. Diamond DeGaulos professing to be operating a contrarian Salman Rushdie outspokenness to give as a cure the rant and raving of the afflicted, when in reality she was working with Cliff Robertson, who who pilched the persona of JFK for PT 109, and then starred in the opening broadcast of The Outer Limits, which was postponed for Kennedy's state funeral, then went above the World Trade Center to circle in a private plane. So Diamond DeGaulos was actually representing the attackers while wowing the afflicted. The afflicted continue to be so wowed. And it's important to understand on the astral plane the way that Vince Irene of Pittsburgh Catholic Worker Services depicted me as some sort of anti-mercy emissary, a billionaire idealist who was given barely a penny to work with and who got nowhere by his own corruption and so on and so forth. In other words, the cock and bull story of Pittsburgh's East End, Jimmy Creary, the queer bait, who they dragged through glass as one of their nicer acts of Michael Raven's favorite scene. The fact that they brutally tortured me is not particularly topical, except that it shows you the way that they conceive of the victims they created as a form of hope and salvation for the afterlife, burning away their sins. How can we squeeze this emissary of public schools through the eye of a needle without being fulfillment of our Moon Unit Zappa's and Cornel West's obsessive conception of necessity to incinerate. And this is allowed through administration in University of Pittsburgh, Carnegie Mellon University, University of Washington, and the Mariners Home Office. fact, Ichiro Suzuki vying for local approval with the spirit of Jimi Hendrix depicted me in psychedelics with a caller reading Mac. You know, trying to get worked up about these people in their Periscope job um, without triggering them is a prerogative of Beatles subliminally alone. They've been running a Swami Nostra for a long time. Ouspensky and Gurdjieff were gyrated about by um, him, this Robert Fripp of King Kook, the Church of England's diabolicist from Wimborne. And of course, David Bowie played all sides, and he was supposedly the hero of the Helden of the um, Melvin Belly circus. Melvin Belly was chosen from the belly of the beast, the belly of Roe versus Wade, Henry Wade. He framed Oswald, and then Melvin Belly being down from Star Trek, where he was a guest star, to represent Jack Ruby, who had the same psychiatrist as Chucky Manson. So we began to see the goblin of the fourth dimensional pseudo reality show, the Dan Rather routine, where the head goes forward and Big Brother says, "Do not watch this operative frame. Trust Rather." So, and they reversed a couple of frames in Life magazine purportedly to give it sort of a wiggle to look like it went backwards. I mean, I'm not sure of that. I've never verified it with my own senses, but I've read that that may have happened. Um, Talk to the Kennedy researchers online if you want to follow up on that. But whatever else is said very clearly goes violently backwards. I mean, so you see this layout, because cubism is a model form of decision making in highways, for example, and they used cubist structures to represent their reason, which they give here in Tacoma: four strikes, pins, high court, 1122. It was an army operation they called Two Virgins Pussy Bowl. So this is a script that I found at the University of Pittsburgh, the Pittman Hitman Quarryman script from Oswald Mosley's crowd and these Israelis. Um, Not only lends a number of insights into the way it was encrypted in Hollywood films by Reagan and his brethren, tracing back to D.W. Griffith's association with Mussolini, but which is, of course, the source, the futurist movement of things like the lyrics on Magical Mystery Tour. But it also shows that JFK was a victim of Two Virgins Pussy Bowl, which is the semi-audit that I found, and which is also encrypted in the Army High Court place designations here in Tacoma. There's others. There's a number of them. You can look, research, scrounge on my blog, and you'll find others. So this is probably Donald Trump. Makes sense. Because some of these things are in skyscrapers, you know. So it's like a big playing board. And it's Byzantine Hellenism. They elevated Midori Goto, and Venus Gabriel was like the queer debate would look for the Lenin linearity. Who will be his Yoko Ono? Well, he needs gratification from the Beatles, so he will choose Midori. And they all laughed, but Midori is a eugenicist in the arc of colors, which includes, we now know, the Wagner division of the Soviet Union. Army control, working behind the scenes with Carl brothers, Lou and Greg Carl, who dissertated on their so-called reasons and methods in torturing me in Pittsburgh. And Obama, of course, the black man who rescues the Japanese woman from the craven white suitor who's selling this panicky hysteria of indulgence in death, sex cult activity on Mount Desert Island that he refuses to fulfill for the gratification of the flock, which is their mentality. It comes from David Jeffman. That's the way they build it with Leslie Katz, John Schulman, Gail Burstyn, Penis Gabriel, and Ono's attorney Amanda Harcourt. But Waspansky was working with Houdini, Prokofiev, Picasso, and Blythe Sanders. He's very important because Blythe Sanders knew Henry Miller, who knew Robert Anton Wilson, who was a participant in the Humanist magazine with Auto Crash in January 1964 after they did in JFK. And he's present in what they call the Antarctic Harmony Circus of UW Dialectical here in Tacoma. But Blythe Sanders goes back to the 1910s, and he lost an arm in World War I. So he's part of the invisible armed structure that rescued Hitler. An idea of Houdini they called Lazarus, and then brought him back as Casper. And Casper, that's why they were saying when this kid Casper tortured me, Lenin tortured you, because Casper and Hitler are as one in the mighty hymnography of Penis McCartney and his buddies, who, they just kick people like me off the earth. What do they care? I mean, it was an opium war. Get rid of the legitimate leadership of the 60s and then blast everybody with Houdini rock and roll and say you're your own worst enemy. Casper, Lenin tortured you. Yeah, so they lined it up through Hollywood. Takai and Belly worked with John Wayne and Oswald to sell a hallucinogenic circus in the name of a German singing, a Marine singing in German, which is how the Green Berets opens, to create this Hollywood scene. War is Hell, which was showing at Texas Theater where Oswald was arrested, gives you a perfect idea of what they mean by the Beatles, because it shows all these guys in combat crawling along the ground, the Beatles crawl. And it was also named for the Beetle VW, which Adolf Hitler inaugurated back in days when he gave Henry Ford a medal. And Henry Ford was a big employee of blacks to keep them out of the Union. But the point is that behind the scenes, people who saw the benefit of black fascism helped work up this eugenic arc. And Barack Obama and Joe Biden are going to jump on the climate change bandwagon. But you didn't see them. Obama was whining that he would end up like JFK, someone said. I never verified that. That's two things you have to verify on yourself. That the Life magazine actually switched the frame. I've never verified that for myself. That Obama actually said he didn't want to end up as JFK, like JFK. I don't know that he actually said that. I can't verify that, but it certainly seems like him. Somebody who could mildly depict him, lampoon him as saying something like that. And it would certainly resonate, which is one of their key words. Vanessa Nakate is like Beyonce. And that's supposed to resonate among the survivor group who are being allowed. Now, I want to tell you, as a witness, they didn't do anything about ecology when it came up. They didn't integrate it into school curriculum. They didn't care. They've been plotting a deluge. And it's delusional to deny it. It's not conspiracy theory. Monbiot, buzz off. You can check the results, check the facts for yourself. What happened was that the prognosis was we still have time to have wonderful party. So just when we know what to do when the party's over.